Hey, my name's Brent. Welcome back to the TPR 86cc build series. My last couple of videos were getting the scooter ready to go to a car show and then riding around the car show. And the scooter ran great the whole time, no complaints there. But when I came home, I found that one of my water pump bolts was loose. Actually, I have switched this over to a stud instead of a bolt. But anyway, I tried to tighten that up naturally, and then I found that it wouldn't tighten. So I tried to loosen it up, take it out of there, and it won't come out. I was expecting to find that my time-cert thread repair had failed, and I'd just have to deal with that. But as you can see, the whole top of the ear or the tab on the case is broken off. So I'm going to have to get the water pump and the bracket, etc. off of there so I can try to deal with that. While I'm removing this, I'll tell you that the cart water pump setup has been on here for over 800 miles now, and I have been very pleased with it. Really, the only issues that I've had are related to this single bolt here. I've got another bolt in the bracket. That's given me no trouble. It's just been this one for some reason. I stripped out the threads in the case, and I've had a bolt break, or I think 2 bolts break. That's why I switched to the stud, and now obviously it's broken that tab off in the case. Other than that, it has been pretty much trouble-free, and it always runs cool. No issues. Same belt on there. I haven't replaced the belt at all in that time period, so I've been very pleased with it. The most obvious solution for this would be to replace this case half. There are a few reasons that I don't want to do that. First off, it's a CPI case half. So it is a Chinese case half, but I don't really know where to get a CPI case half again. And if I just buy any old Chinese made 1E40 QMB case half, sometimes they don't match up very well with the other half. I've actually bought 2 halves from the same company, same brand, put them together, and they didn't match up well at all. So I'd rather not go through that. Plus, because this is a big bore stroker engine, you've got to bore the case half for the cylinder, you've got to bore it for the crankshaft, you've got a port match, and I also go through the process of backfilling these cases with JB Weld and then cutting trenches in there, so more port work. Plus my KX85 reed setup on here is a bit larger, so it has to be filed for the reeds to fit, etc. It's just quite a bit of work that goes into getting a case half ready, so if possible, I'd like to save this. Knowing that I want to save it, the first thing that probably comes to mind for most of you is to weld this. So usually a TIG welder would be used, and you could either fill this whole area or perhaps make up a piece and have it welded on, put fresh threads in there, and you'd be good to go. However, first off, I don't own a TIG machine, and if I did, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I have no way to weld the aluminum. Second off, I could take it to a welder. I've got a welder right down the road, a professional. However, I have filling all in here of JB Weld. I'll put some pictures up here, you can't see it, and I'm hoping not to have to take all this apart. But I've got filling all in the cases that is JB Weld, and JB Weld is only good to 550 degrees, so I have a feeling it's going to cause a problem if too much heat is put into the cases. On the same token, I do have a MAP gas torch, or even MAP gas or propane and oxygen torch. So I could try brazing this, but again, to braze this, it's got to be up to 700 degrees. The JB Weld is good to 550. I don't want to cause any trouble there. And also, if you did all that, it has to be totally taken apart, which I could deal with if I thought that was a good solution otherwise. I'm hoping that maybe JB Weld will work for me. I'm not really confident in this plan, but what I'm thinking is if I grind this off and kind of get this whole area up top flat, I can take a chunk of aluminum and cut it to fit. I'll be able to JB Weld it to this flat top on the case that I'm left with, and then I can drill and tap it for this bolt hole and hopefully put another mounting bolt hole over here and then add on to my existing bracket. That way I've got kind of double the support there. Now I'm not sure if the JB Weld is actually going to hold up to that kind of force, the stress that's put on there, but by my logic, if I get that on top of here and it all breaks off, I'm not really out anything. I mean, it could cause me to break down on the side of the road, but hopefully nothing else will fail. It won't tear anything else up, and I won't really be out anything. If I go to try to weld it and it melts the JB Weld in the cases, then it's a lot of work to get back to doing that. and it may even at that point make more sense to replace the whole case half. So I'm just going to give this a try and we will see what happens. Now I've got a nice flat surface to mount a chunk of aluminum to, but I don't think it's going to be that simple. When I put the bracket on, you can see why. Because this bolt hole does not sit very far above the flat surface, and I don't want to create another paper thin wall that's going to crack in the future. I'm going to try to cut this area where the bolt's going to be downward a little bit to allow for a thicker wall in the chunk of aluminum that will eventually house the bolt holes. There's the basic shape. I'll probably have to refine this a bit more when I start working with the piece of aluminum that goes on here, but that should be close to what I'm after. The reason that you saw me grinding the front is because the back section here stuck out a little further than the front section did, and if I'm going to end up extending the bracket back there, I wanted to make sure all of this was just flat across there. I've got a piece of 5/8 of an inch aluminum that I bought for another project and I didn't end up using it there. But it looks like it's going to match up fairly well with this area, so I'm going to go ahead and cut a chunk off of the end. I need to get this block to conform to the shape of this area better, so I'm going to try to use a piece of paper and a pencil to make a rubbing. That way I can transfer it onto this aluminum. Here's how it looks after putting it in place and checking the fit, taking it back off, filing a little off or sanding a little off here and there. Only did that maybe 40,000 times and looks halfway decent. I actually screwed up here. I've got a larger gap than I should because I flipped it over. I needed a little off of this side, and when I flipped it over, I guess my brain got reversed as well and I took a little off of here. But other than that, it's fairly close. And you'll also notice that I have scraped and scratched and dug some little divots in both sides here just to hopefully help the JB Weld have some more places to sit in there and grab. Now I'm cleaning both surfaces with a little bit of acetone. Once that dries, I'll mix up some JB Weld and apply that. This has had about 18 hours to set up now, and I'm not concerned about the appearance, but for clearance reasons, I need to sand and file down this section as well as the front section. It looks like as long as this will hold, this could probably go back into service now as a working setup. But while I'm here, I'm going to extend this bracket for the water pump so that it has a piece that goes across this face, and then I can put a second mounting bolt in there, so it'll actually have 3 total mounting bolts. I used cardboard to make up a template. Now I've just got to transfer that to a piece of 1/4-inch steel. Now I'm going to try to drill through both the bracket and the addition to the case at the same time to make it easy to add another bolt hole. Initially I was thinking I would put an 8mm bolt in here, but I'm kind of thinking I might end up sticking with an M6 just because I want to leave plenty of material, especially in the aluminum back here. I may end up changing my mind. We'll see how it looks once I've got it drilled out. That's drilled to 5mm so I can tap it for an M6 thread, and it looks like there's enough room that I could go up to M8, but I think for now I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to go ahead and tap it to M6 by 1.0. This feels secure. I can pick up the whole engine by this. It's probably fine now, but John, that's 190mech on the 49ccscoop.com forums, pretty much always has great ideas about everything. And he posted one of his ideas about another reinforcement. So right now, the 2 bolts here, the extra bolt will help to hold the bracket and the water pump itself, but it's still putting all of the stress on that chunk of aluminum that I JB welded to the cases. So with John's idea, this bracket will wrap around and get more support. He's saying I could even get a bit of a clamp here with some rubber hose, but mostly be clamped here on this stud for the exhaust mount, or the boss coming off here for the exhaust mount. And that way it will help to support the aluminum bracket so that it can't get twisting force and so on. And I think I might actually take it a step further than that. I've been working on this cardboard template, very similar to John's idea, but I'm actually going to try to use both of these mounts for the exhaust, and that way it should really lock it in place. I don't want to try to put too much force on the engine mount itself since it is supposed to swivel. I'm sure it would be fine with a rubber hose like John suggested, but I think for me it may be easier to try and get the support back here from these 2 exhaust mounts. And I have picked up a chunk of 1/4-inch aluminum so that I can transfer this onto there. For the actual interaction with the exhaust mounts, I think what I'm going to do is probably make these holes larger, and then in the lathe I will make up a couple of pieces that will hopefully be a very tight fit against the exhaust mounts there, and somehow either press fit into this piece, into this bracket, or maybe be brazed in there. I'm not sure yet. I've got the exhaust studs wrapped in cardboard right now because I have drilled these holes larger than they need to be for the actual stud bosses, or whatever you would call those, the standoffs there. But that'll give you an idea of what I'm hoping it's like when I'm done. Imagine that the cardboard is a bushing. I'm going to try to make some sort of bushing for each one of those. And as long as it fits fairly snug on there, that should take all the play out of this plate and allow it to reinforce the aluminum patch or repair to my case. So the next thing I've got to do is try to make the bushings that will fit in here. So the bushings are made. The top one I can push on by hand until it's flush with the end of this mount. The bottom one, I have to kind of tap it on. It's pretty snug. But I think that will be a good fit. The outside diameters of both should be a mild press fit into the bracket. I pressed the bushings in place in this bracket so that everything would be flush, and I've got it installed so the whole deal is flush with the exhaust mounts. But when you look at the top, you can see I've got about a 1/4 inch gap here between this outer plate and the water pump bracket itself. So what I need to do is to get this plate pressed in further, or actually press the bushings further into the plate until this sits right up against the water pump bracket. I measured the gap and it turned out to be almost exactly a 1/4 inch, so that makes this really easy for me. I just took a couple of pieces of scrap 1/4 inch material, put them under there, and then I'll go ahead and press these through until they touch the arbor plates. That's taking care of the gap for the most part. This plate sits right up against the bracket in the rear. However, up front there is a little bit of a gap, so there's some sort of alignment issue. I think the easiest way to deal with this is going to be just to use a washer between the two of these when I bolt it together, and I think that should work just fine. I was initially planning to braze these bushings in place in the bracket just to be certain that it couldn't move, but everything is very secure right now. I mean, there is no play whatsoever in that. I believe they are pressed fit tight enough through there that nothing's going to move. You never know, because going down the road, all the vibration of this thing turning 10 to 14,000 RPM most of the time, it'll do things that you wouldn't expect. But if there's a problem with the bushings right now, it would be easier to get them out than if I braze them in. And also, if I do just need to braze them in place, I could always do that later. So for right now, I think the only thing I really need to do to this is to go ahead and drill the holes for the mounting bolts up here. I will need to take this steel bracket back off and put a coat of paint on there because I don't want it to rust. And then I'll have to go over it and reinstall all of the fasteners with some thread locker. But other than that, I'm going to call this finished. If you've enjoyed this video, found it interesting, or maybe it's given you some ideas for a repair of your own, then please be sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more and click the bell to receive notifications, and thank you for watching.